The following program contains the opinions of the host, guests, and call-in participants. These do not necessarily represent the views of this show's distributors or sponsors. This program may contain obscene, profane, or otherwise objectionable language. Viewer discretion is advised. Hey, coming to you cordless, everybody. It's Wednesday night, November 19th, 2025. It's 1 minute past 9 p.m. on the East Coast of the United States and 6:01 on the West Coast. And here where I'm sitting in Northeast Minneapolis, it's 8:01 p.m. Central Time. I am Jim Peters. Welcome to another edition of Jim Peters at Night. This is episode number 295. If you're keeping score at home, which means we're creeping up on 300. That's what we're doing. We'll talk about that in a second. Our guest tonight is Marcus Lowth. He's a UFO author and researcher. He does a whole bunch of stuff. He's the editor of UFO Insight magazine. He has a podcast with Steve Mara, who's also another great UFO researcher. The podcast is called the Anomaly Project Podcast, and you can find that at theanomalyprojectpodcast.com. Anyway, we're going to be talking about the UFOs and all the creepy crawly paranormal stuff, which, and you know, I love this stuff. You know that, so yeah, you got that to look forward to. It's a great talk. He's a great guy. I told him this. I don't see how he cranks this stuff out. He writes a lot. He writes for Mysterious Universe. He writes for several other different publications and in addition to editing UFO Insight and I just bought his first book, which is called, what is it called? I can't remember. Well, it's terrible. I bought it this morning. I didn't realize he had a book out. I purchased it. I like reading his stuff. Anyway, and also I want to apologize for last night. We were supposed to do a show last night. We had two guests booked, Michael Harrison, the publisher of Talkers Magazine, and Jarrett Knott, who wrote the book Tiny Blunders, Big Disasters. So here's what happened. Harrison called in sick. He couldn't do it. And then we did the interview with Jarrett Knott, but we had such severe technical problems that we have to edit the interview. So because of that, we didn't do it last night because editing is time consuming and a pain in the ass. So, and we have to edit this a lot. I mean, we shot 45 minutes and we're basically about 30 of it will probably end up standing. So, but we did do it. He's an interesting guy. His books, he's written two books now in this series about small, unusual, obscure details of history that led to huge, enormous consequences. That's the book, and it's really fascinating. And he's an interesting guy, and I enjoyed talking to him. And so anyway, tomorrow night we had Tim Conaway scheduled, our old friend, the former editor of Hustler magazine. And we're going to have him on, and we're going to play Jarrett Knott's interview, which we were supposed to play last night. So that happens tomorrow night. Then Monday, we have Dr. Gilda Carl on, psychologist. She wrote the book called Real Men Don't Go Woke is the name of her book. She's a charming woman, fascinating. She came on about 9 months ago. We're having her back. We're starting to, there's too many guests and not enough time. That's the thing. There is. So too many interesting people to talk to. So anyway, she's going to be our last show. That's this coming Monday before Thanksgiving. We're going to take the rest of Thanksgiving week off, and then we're coming back on, that would be December 1st, Monday, December 1st. Wednesday, December 3rd, if you could do some quick math there, today's show 295. Wednesday, December 3rd is going to be our 300th show. And I don't know who we're going to have on. We're going to try and make a big bang up thing. We're taking the other night off, and also we're taking the following Monday off, too. I had to do it. Got stuff going on. Don't have a choice. Sorry about that. But yeah, so that's what we got. That's the schedule here. That's what we got going on tonight. After the interview with the Marcus Louth. We got another Gymcast. I'm going to talk about some fascinating stuff. Today is International Toilet Day. I thought you'd want to know that. So you get to listen to some really pleasant music for 12 seconds here, and then Marcus Louth is going to appear from the UK. It actually worked. Got a connection. And actually, the intertube works. Here we go. Joining us from his home in the UK, and we actually got a connection here that actually works. Marcus Louth. He is well, first of all, you're the editor of UFO Insight, right?
That's right. Yeah, I don't own the site, but I do edit it, and I'm responsible for most of the articles on there. So yeah, that's correct.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And you do a podcast, and I didn't realize this. I didn't know you did your podcast with Steve Mara. He was on about 9-10 months ago. We had him on. Great conversation with him. I'm going to put your website on. It's the Anomaly Project Podcast, and it's at theanomalyprojectpodcast.com. That's your website correct. Right there. Yeah. So you guys have done, I just checked, we've done about 25 episodes so far, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we launched in February. Well, no, sorry, we started the nut of the idea in February, but we launched in May 2nd, I think, 2025 this year. And yeah, that whole drive is really looking at the connections between all aspects of the paranormal, UFOs, ghosts, cryptids, and just how they're all connected. But yeah, it's a great chance to speak to other researchers, investigators, share ideas, theories.
Well, I was going to ask you about that. So, okay, so you've obviously now, I was just telling you just before we came on here, I don't see how you keep your output up. I mean, my God, you write so much stuff. Here's your book. And I was just telling you before we went on the air here that I just bought it. I had a bookmark. I don't know why I didn't purchase it previously, but I bought it this morning. And I'm looking forward to reading that. You know, you've got a great style, and also what can I say? You write about a lot of stuff that people are interested in, you know.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm interested in it myself. I think that's the most important thing. You know, I mean, I really do. Sounds cliche, but you live and breathe this stuff. You know, I mean, every morning I wake up and I make sure I get my head into some kind of research, whether just reading someone's book or someone's paper. And then obviously you can't help but write about what you find out. And so it's an ongoing process, you know, like the Anomaly Project. It's sort of research in real time. You know, you're constantly taking in more and more information. And I suppose that has to come out some way. So, but yeah, I mean, I've just got as much interest in writing this stuff as people have, hopefully, in reading it. So,
well, okay. So I have a question for you. Speaking of your podcast, now you just explained this, and I gathered your podcast is you're trying to come up with the unified theory of all this paranormal stuff. And so, okay, you think about this a lot. Any theories of what's going on? I mean, you're not the only person who thought this. There seems like, you know, you talk about the reincarnation phenomena, you talk about after near-death experiences. There seems to be this thing that all of this stuff kind of happens in kind of some same place. Do you have any theories now what's going on?
Yeah, I mean, essentially, it's hard to condense into you know, like a little show, but essentially there seems to be two main kind of theories regarding how this stuff is connected. And I kind of fall somewhere in between the two, actually. You know, there's lots of branches off on these things. But essentially, some people think that what we're dealing with here is an overriding intelligence, like a trickster element that manifests in different forms, whether it be UFOs, aliens, Bigfoot, ghosts. And essentially, it is looking to almost trick humanity for its own unknown agenda, similar to the tales of the jinn. Other people suspect that the connection between all this stuff is more of a mechanism, something that allows UFOs to manifest in our reality, ghosts to manifest in our reality, even cryptid creatures, which, you know, a lot of research has suggested there's a supernatural element to these cryptids as opposed to flesh and blood. So I kind of fall somewhere in between the two. I suspect that there is a mechanism that is responsible for allowing all these things to appear. And to manifest and how we perceive them. But within that, I also suspect that there probably is some kind of trickster element, some kind of overriding intelligence, whatever that might be. And I think that kind of is like, you know, navigating in and around this stuff. So sometimes a person might be seeing their Auntie Betty, but sometimes they might be seeing somebody who just looks like Auntie Betty for its own possibly nefarious purposes. So yeah, as to like what the overall agenda is, I mean that's the overriding question. You mentioned like reincarnation as well there, and you know, astral projection and what happens after death. There's a researcher called Anthony Peake, and he is really up on this stuff, and I recommend anybody checks him out. I recommend you get him on your show as well. But I mean, he's basically he's already at, I suspect, where I am going with my research on this, that consciousness, human consciousness, both subconscious and the conscious mind, is so important in this. I mean, he highlights, for example, how near-death experiences, they kind of mirror alien abduction phenomena. People seeing bright lights, strange creatures around them, intense fear. And it's an interesting little side note that when you look at alien abduction cases, people can recall going towards this light, what we might suspect is the spaceship, but they can't actually recall entering it. They just wake up in some kind of strange room. And that's just one thing that he highlights. So, yeah, I mean, it's basically trying to delve into all that. And it's an ongoing project. It's an ongoing research, really, because every time you think you've got a bit of a handle on this, something else comes along and you think, oh, I have to rethink that now. So, yeah, I think ultimately my own personal view is that it's a mechanism that assists in these all manner of things manifesting in our reality. And what that mechanism is, as I say, that's why the research continues.
Well, I'm not the only person who's proposed this. You know, you're talking about the near-death experiences and reincarnation, all that stuff, and the alien abductions. There's a theory that this is all happening in another dimensional space, that somehow everything gets switched to another dimensional space that we on Earth here don't have access to, whereas humans, living humans, we don't have access to. What do you think of that? I mean, do you think there's anything to that?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, if you think, I was speaking to somebody on it yesterday, literally about this, and we were talking about how just take the human visual range, for example, the spectrum that we can see things, about 3%, 3 or 4%, something like that. There's a whole host of stuff going on around us that we just cannot see. And the same with sound and pitch and what we can hear. And so essentially, like Tesla said, the importance in all this is like frequency and vibration and things of that nature. So it's really a case of, I suspect, without wanting to come across too, psychedelic and hippie sort of thing, but it's kind of like we vibrate at a certain frequency. And so we can only see things that vibrate within that frequency that we can detect. So if for example, you talk about after death or near death experiences, it's almost as if what we would better understand as the soul, that is released temporarily, and that's possibly vibrating at a completely different frequency once it's outside of the human body. And that's probably why we then have access to these, other beings, other realms. But I certainly do think there is an interdimensional aspect to all of this. I mean, even dreams. I was speaking to someone about this a couple of weeks ago because we spoke about it on the Anomaly Project, and we were talking about dreams and connections between dreams and out-of-body experiences. And someone just suggested that dreams could almost be where you just kind of hitch a ride on another version of you in another dimension. And that kind of fascinated me. As much as I knew we were just speculating and etc. But a lot of dreams I have where I'm literally walking down my street in this dream, and I know it's a dream, but obviously it seems so lifelike. But there's just tiny, minute little changes. Like, some building might be there instead of over here, and things of that nature. It's always seemingly perpetually dark. And so that kind of got me thinking, is there any truth in that? Could we be like hitching rides on other versions of ourselves in other dimensions in our dreams? Now, again, I want to stress that's just speculation. We're just idle chit chat amongst friends and researchers. But yeah, that other dimensions, consciousness, I do think that that's really important and will prove to be important if we ever do, as a collective, get to closer to the heart of all of this.
Marcus, I have all my life, I've had very, very weird dreams, and I've come to the conclusion for myself, but it must be true for other people. There's stuff I dream that I swear to God I could not make up. So you're looking at my unconscious mind dreaming up stuff that I don't think I'm capable of dreaming up. And also, I'm not the only person who mentioned this too. I have dreams, and then occasionally I have something that seems like something completely different. It seems like I'm in another reality, and they do not seem the same. I don't know what to make of any of this, but I don't think my mind, I'm a pretty creative person. I've done a lot of crap. But I don't think my mind is capable of dreaming some of this stuff up. I think it's that I'm actually someplace.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting you mentioned that. Just to go back to Anthony Peake again to answer this, he was talking about, precognition and people who perhaps, see things from the future in their dreams and also from the past, what they will interpret as probably past life memories. And what he was saying was that if you look at the Akashic record, for example, like this big knowledge bank where all the memories, all the knowledge, everything from all humanity's history is contained there, is essentially almost like a memory bank of the souls. And he was saying it's quite feasible in your dreams. If your subconscious mind is wandering, wherever it's wandering to, then it could be picking up. You think of them as files from the Akashic record and just like downloading that, seeing what's in there, and then you come out and sleep and you've kind of, oh, that was a weird dream. Well, you could just literally be accessing someone else's records, and it's
Right.
from another dimension, from another life. And again, that's all speculative because we don't really know. Nobody, even science doesn't really know what to make of dreams. So, but yeah, I can understand where you're coming from, because as he explained it, the subconscious mind almost goes a wandering while we're asleep, and we have no idea where it goes.
Yeah. So I checked my bookmarks today for stuff of yours, and I had bookmarked an article you wrote about a year ago, and apparently I bookmarked because I didn't read it, but it was about reincarnation, and you talked about Jim Tucker at the University of Virginia, and you didn't mention in the article, but his predecessor, Ian Stevenson, who did all this research in the 1960s, and I think that's very important because most of this was done pre-internet. So they interviewed hundreds of these children who said they had been other people. There's no way they could have known this stuff. You couldn't have Googled it in 1965. But the real amazing thing is, getting back to what you're talking about, like just kind of the consciousness of the whole thing. So both Tucker and Stevenson have said there's only two possibilities here. One is these kids really were another person in past life. The other possibility, which is equally as weird, actually, is that somehow they have erroneously tapped into some giant universal database of souls and accessed some other person's data. But okay, that's just as weird as reincarnation. That's strange.
Yeah, and the fact that they're saying that back then, I mean, a lot of what people speak about consciousness now is almost a consequence of quantum physics and quantum mechanics and our understanding of that, and that's still in its infancy, really. So the fact that these guys were saying that, and I know people are aware of quantum physics back then, but the fact that they were saying that back then, it is really interesting. And I think the fact that, I mean, again, just thinking out loud when you mention that to me there, you've got a couple of possibilities, haven't you? You've got like they could be right, they could be tapping into some kind of knowledge bank and accessing these memories. It could be that yes, they did live before as this person, and quite often I think you'll find that, like you're saying, most often than not, these people are children who remember these past lives, and quite often they live relatively close by geographically to the person that they claim to once lived.
Yeah.
I think the third possibility here could be that is it possible, for example, and again, I'm not going to look at rhyme or reason on this, but the person who's passed away, could they, for whatever reason, have just tapped into this person, this child, and almost not possessed them, but inserted their subconscious in there and drove them? Because quite a lot of the times, people who claim to have past memories, they suffer like a traumatic death. They don't just like die of old age. They normally could be murdered, some kind of tragic accident. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of possibilities, but I'm quite impressed that those guys were kind of looking at that possibility back then, because I certainly think it is something worth considering. It's very strange, don't get me wrong, but
Are you familiar with a guy named Michael Newton, he's a psychologist in the United States who passed away about 4 or 5 years ago? He wrote a series of books. He interviewed hundreds of people under hypnosis, and what he wanted to know, he wasn't interested so much in past lives as he was what he called the intermission. What happens between your lives? Where do you go? And he said I've read a couple of his books. The stories were remarkably the same. Basically, everybody described the same experience. And also, this is something we need to address here, too, about the fact that when in these near-death experiences people have, it appears that the people have different descriptions, but really they're trying to describe an undescribable event. In other words, my impression is they're all having roughly the same experience, but they can't describe it. So they use different, I saw Jesus or I saw Elvis or something, whatever, You know what I mean? Is that what your experience is too? Or what you gathered from this?
Yeah, again, and it goes back to perception, I think, that, because as you say, I mean, you look at near-death experiences and people, I think it's important to mention as well here that, and again, I'm not promoting anything of that nature, but during near-death experience, the brain releases what's essentially DMT, almost in preparation for death. And this is the same stuff you'll find in things like ayahuasca and things of that nature, that people used to communicate with the gods. So the fact that that's happening and people are having these near-death experiences and essentially interacting, for want of a better phrase, are certainly aware of other beings or entities around them. It would suggest that, that perhaps there is something to do with this unlocking the subconscious and seeing other realms. And obviously the body seems to do that in preparation for death. So it does make you wonder, well, where do we, our soul, or whatever you want to call it, go? Now, in terms of people, like you say, describing, I saw Jesus, and some people will say, literally, I read that line this morning in a book, people saying that they saw Elvis Presley. I think that goes down to perception again. And it's almost as if what's left of your rationale, even though it's a subconscious mind, will try and interpret things in a way that they know. So if you're a particularly religious person, then you might think you see Jesus. I suppose the other element to this is that these creatures are intelligent, these entities, these beings, whatever they are, and they perhaps can tap into your subconscious and manifest in ways that you might understand or not be frightened of, for want of a better word. But yeah, I agree that the number of testimonies for people who have experienced this are just so much the same. Now, you say they'll describe things differently, slightly. And I think what resonates as well is, again, going back to alien abduction encounters, they're remarkably similar details of strange entities around them, bright lights, that feeling of almost being out of your body. I mean, there's a number of alien abduction encounters where there's been investigators there. They've gone to a location. I think it's happened in Australia most famously, and I forget the lady's name, Purdy, I think, but either way. And she was saying, they're coming for me, they're coming. And they were all in this car waiting for the UFO to show up, and it did. And then she came out of some kind of trance, and she said, she was shocked. She said, well, you've not left the vehicle. And she said, well, I've been on board. I've been on board the spacecraft. So that suggests some kind of out-of-body experience intertwined with an alien abduction. So yeah, I think it's fascinating that these encounters are all reading the same, they're all putting the same details across. And I think the more we read, the more we research in that field and alien abduction fields, for example, the more we see these crossovers, the more we see details bleed into each other. So it's fascinating stuff, and we're just getting to this is just a tip of the iceberg, really.
What do you make of the concept, which I'm starting to buy extreme more and more all the time, about the fact that consciousness doesn't really reside locally? That consciousness is a signal. People describe the analogy is that it's a television signal. Your television may break, but the signal is still there. You just can't get it anymore.
Absolutely, yeah. And again, I mean, for old Anthony Peake, I know, but he pretty much summed it up that way. That, for example, he used the radio as opposed to television. He said, the music's coming from the radio, but you wouldn't then take the back of the radio off and expect to see the little musicians in there playing the music for you. It's obviously coming in on a wave, on a frequency. And yeah, I think it sounds silly to say it because it goes against everything we think we know, but I think it almost makes more sense that consciousness does come from outside of, science will say it's from inside the brain, but I don't know if that's true. I really don't. There's frequencies bounding about everywhere, and we can only see and detect some of them. So I think it makes a lot of sense that consciousness probably might at least originate outside of the human brain or the mind.
I never actually said why I was talking about Michael Newton and this guy who interviewed all these people at the intermission. So he was saying that the people he talked to said that time is linear. In other words, people do not. How do you put this? Supposedly when you reincarnate, you don't reincarnate into the past. You always do. You always come into what we consider the present, and that time is linear, and so you're always moving forward. And that's basically you get to pick your parents. You don't necessarily get to pick who you are, but you get to pick your parents, the woman who gives birth to you. But the thing about that is that about time moving forward. And then, about 5-6 years ago, 2 guys won the Nobel Prize in physics for determining that time is linear. And I got to admit, I don't buy it. Now, I don't know if you've been following this. There's a Polish physicist this summer. He says he has discovered that time itself is 3 dimensions, which means we live in a 6-dimensional universe. And he says we can't perceive it, but you can go sideways and backwards in time and up and down, just like you can like through space, and that makes more sense to me because I don't understand time. It just seems intuitively wrong to me that time would be linear. It just does. I don't know why.
Yeah, no, I mean, I know what you're saying. I mean, on this one, I mean, obviously, common sense and common knowledge tells us time is linear. You go from one and you keep progressing, and that probably is in line with the Big Bang if you buy that, and the constant stretch. However, as you say, there's plenty of research and speculation, admittedly, to suggest that time is not linear. It's much more almost circular, like a constant loop. And like you said, it's not just that you can go sideways, up, down, and this and explain different dimensions. Time and space are linked, for example. And in terms of when a person does die, and like you say, I mean, if they do reincarnate, apparently time doesn't exist. From people who have claimed to have experienced this, near-death experiences, or people who are in touch with spirit guides or claim to be mediums, and they say that in that realm, wherever it is and wherever it's hosted, time doesn't actually exist. Time is more a concept of humanity, really, and it is. You can't get away with that. That it is. But yeah, this theory suggests that everything is happening all the time at once, the future, past, present, and that's sometimes why. And again, I know science will say they've explained deja vu, but a lot of people aren't really satisfied with that explanation. And so people say that is why you get elements of deja vu, is that, you've experienced everything all the time. The past me is from 10 years ago, he's living his life 10 years ago right now, as much as the future me, all being well, will be living his life 10 years from the future right now. Again, these are theories and speculations that are a bit outlandish, but again, I think the more, especially when you figure in quantum physics into this, it just shows us that we don't know what we think we know. So yeah, I think there's a lot of validity into saying that time might not be linear, might not be as straightforward as we think it is.
We don't know shit.
Yeah.
We don't. So I don't know about you, but there's concept I have no trouble buying. A lot of people say they've been abducted, say that the aliens actually take them directly through walls, and it's like passing through jello, right? And people say, well, you couldn't do that. But then think about this, Marcus. You look through glass all the time. You can see through glass. It's only one more atomic step to passing through it, isn't it? It's not that difficult, would it? I mean, I can't do it, but still, as a concept, I don't find it that big a stretch. I just don't.
No, I mean, like you say, I would listen to somebody explain, and this is just basic school science, but, like looking at a chair, for example, and it's solid to us, but essentially that chair is made up of almost all empty space. You've got atoms there, and the only thing that makes it solid is the force of those atoms. And off the back of that, they were saying about these entities, whatever they are, we were speaking about alien abductions, but it could be anything that's non-human, perhaps they're hiding within the atoms. Perhaps that's where they reside, and that's why we cannot see them. And again, going back to quantum physics and quantum mechanics, our understanding of that might help us unravel that. In terms of aliens taking you and bringing you through walls and things of that nature, I think it's an interesting concept because if you take Bigfoot, for example, as a prime example here, some people will say Bigfoot's a flesh and blood creature. Others will say, well, it can't be because it just disappears into thin air. But there's no reason it can't be both. What if these creatures, and we've said Bigfoot, but what if aliens as well? What if they have some kind of technology that can literally, just fuse solids so you can pass through them? Or perhaps there's some kind of supernatural trait where they can literally just pass through dimensions. Because when you think of dimensions and portals and gateways, people probably think about Stargate and, actual big round circles and shimmery water. But I suspect portals and other dimensional gateways, if they exist, I don't think you'll even see them. I just think you'll just pass through. And I've no evidence for that. Obviously, it's just what I suspect from what people who have had time slips, for example, have said, that they're literally walking down the street and the next minute everything changes. There's just no little doorway that you walk through. It's just almost like there's an invisible gap. So yeah, it's an interesting thing, and I think that's another good point to raise when you're looking at connections between all these different areas of research, because alien abductions and aliens taking people through walls, well, you see ghosts disappear through walls and things of that nature. So again, it's just these little things that are cropping up, which, like you say, there's plenty of researchers highlighting this now, that there does seem to be a connection across the board, and we just need to know what that connection is so we can move forward.
Before I lose this, I have to bring this up. I have a lot of people who talk about Bigfoot on the show. Now, one of my friends, one of the regulars who comes on once a month, and God bless him, Larry Newman, just had a stroke, unfortunately. He's doing okay, but he's been out of commission for a while. He's an investigator for the Bigfoot Field Research Organization here in the United States. and he got that job because he's a police investigator. They wanted somebody who actually knew how to investigate, seriously. But he said he was a skeptic until he saw a family of Bigfoot in the Ozark Mountains in the middle of the night through an infrared camera. He watched them for an hour. Okay, fine. Now, but the reason I'm bringing this up is because I've also had Stan Gordon on the show, a very famous UFO and Bigfoot researcher in the United States. And so now, Stan spends most of his time now researching Bigfoot. So I talked to these two gentlemen. Larry is absolutely convinced that Bigfoot is an undiscovered primate and doesn't buy any of this paranormal stuff about it at all. He just thinks it's an animal. It's an animal we haven't caught yet. That's what he thinks. Now, Stan, on the other hand, he's been on the show and he says, Jim, there's something weird going on here. There's something about this animal that's paranormal in the sense, because he says, and I've heard this from other people, I'm sure you have too. He says, I've talked to too many people that say they've seen it disappear right before their eyes. Now, you just brought up a thing about, now this is interesting about the fact that it could be both. But the interesting thing about that, Marcus, I think about this, is that as an animal, this animal seems intelligent, but still nonetheless primitive. It's hard for most people to imagine Bigfoot building spaceships. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, I mean, there's definitely a connection between Bigfoot and UFOs, but whether there's a direct connection, whether they are, like working together or whatever. I mean, I spoke to a chap called Trey Hudson from the Meadow Project, and what he was saying is they witnessed Bigfoot creatures, and they were almost being told to solve puzzles by what he could only describe as non-human intelligence, other entities. So obviously you'd have to speak to Trey more about that, but so that would suggest that there's not so much a direct connection as opposed to that these entities are using these creatures. Now, in terms of their intelligence, I mean, there's two ways to think about this. Like you said, either Bigfoot creatures are more intelligent than we give them credit for, and they can manipulate portals or gateways and they can disappear. There's also a lot of footage going around, and has been for years, of what people are called cloaked Bigfoot. And it sounds really stupid, this, but it's almost like the Predator movies, where you can just see pixelations of light moving. And so again, that suggests, well, is that some kind of technology, which would suggest ultra intelligence, or is it something just within them that they can do? Like a chameleon can change its colors to match its background. Maybe if they are a flesh and blood creature, maybe that's why they disappear. They don't really disappear, they just become invisible. Or perhaps the third thing to contemplate here is that they are flesh and blood creatures, and maybe they don't even realize they're doing it. Maybe they just slip in and out of these dimensional doorways. Perhaps they're from the past, or perhaps they're from another dimension. So again, I can buy all three of those. And one more thing to consider there is, if these are flesh and blood creatures, then if you think about the overriding intelligence that I spoke about at the beginning, then perhaps some of these Bigfoot sightings, particularly the ones where they just disappear, is that trickster element. Perhaps it's not a Bigfoot that people are witnessing on some occasions. Perhaps it's just something else that manifests as a Bigfoot, because that's how it thinks to elicit the response it wants. And one thing to mention off the back of that, excuse me, I know I'll go on, is that a lot of these sightings with the Bigfoot, encrypted creatures, dogmen, whatever you want to call them, they seem to be, the agenda behind them seems to be nothing more than to elicit fear. We don't hardly ever hear of people witnessing these creatures and then being subject to an horrific attack. And we've had cases where people have said they've tripped, they're essentially done for. Instead of the creature, Bigfoot, whatever it is, pouncing in for the kill, it just seems to get as much fear out of them as possible and then will retreat. So I think there's so much for us to think about just on Bigfoot and cryptids alone. And that elicitation of fear also shows up in any abduction cases. It shows up in out-of-body experiences, ghosts, poltergeists. So again, you kind of thinking, whatever all this stuff is, it's almost dependent on our emotions, our fear, our how frightened we might be. But yeah, it just shows you how much there is to think about in all this, really.
And you brought up just in passing a theory that I've been thinking about, because this would be fascinating if it's true, about the fact that maybe these are animals that have a natural ability to cross between dimensions, and they're almost like not aware of it. It's just it's natural for them. But the thing is, if that's the case, they would be the only animal we know on Earth that could do that. That's the real interesting thing about that, And then, like, well, where do they go? Where, we talk about these other dimensions. Where are these places? I mean, are they right next to us? Are there, supposedly we can occupy the same space and not know it? I mean, it's like, but humans, we're not wired to think in more than three dimensions. We can't really comprehend it. You know, so you got this animal that's fairly smart. It's basically like a smart gorilla, but maybe it can actually just do this naturally, and it's not even really even aware of the fact that this is unusual.
No, I mean, I think you're right. I mean, there's examples of the Loch Ness monster, and I forget the one in Canada where it's the same kind of thing, that they're 1 minute and they disappear. What I think is interesting about that, though, is like you say, if we've got a natural animal that can either cloak itself, make it invisible, or even disappear into other dimensions, this might explain why authorities are seemingly so interested. Because you would think, if Bigfoot is just, like you said, just an unknown, undiscovered creature, whereas they might be interested in it, you wouldn't think they'd be so interested in almost covering up accounts, suppressing accounts. You know, I mean, I was speaking to a Bigfoot researcher. I won't name her because of what she said, but she was saying basically she's been to Bigfoot hunts and she's come across, like, you know, big armed patrol units that would only be there in dire situations. So why are they turning up armed to the teeth and not allowing access to areas where there's nothing but Bigfoot? So that might suggest that, okay, maybe they're interested in this. Maybe they're wondering, well, where are these creatures going? Maybe they're looking at not so much the creature, but the potential portals and other dimensions. And again, it's just another aspect, another layer of nuance as to, because there's definitely something to the Bigfoot sightings, for example. There's too many sightings of these creatures
That's right.
for it to be nothing. So we just need to kind of get to grips with it, research this in a serious way, and plenty of people do. But we need to bring on more and more from the mainstream, for want of a better word, to kind of legitimize this research and just to get it out into the wider public arena.
So my friend Larry talks about this. I'm guessing you've heard about this too, that there's been a rumor going around for quite a few years here in the United States that the U.S. government captured a Bigfoot during a California wildfire about 5-6 years ago. And Larry says that in the Bigfoot Field Research Organization, they acknowledge this. They don't know if it's true, but they think it might be likely. But the thing about this, and Larry talks about this also, there's a pragmatic aspect of this. In the United States, at least, you wouldn't want to make Bigfoot public, because if people knew that Bigfoot existed, it would basically shut down the entire logging industry in the United States, because you would now have it. You would have an endangered species that was, you basically couldn't cut down any forest, and for that reason alone, the government might not want this to come out.
No, I think you're absolutely correct. And again, I was speaking to a researcher who said exactly this. I asked her that question, why would they be interested in all this? And she said exactly the same thing. That, if there was Bigfoot discovered, whether it's one single Bigfoot or a family of them or whatever, then you would imagine that that's going to be protected. It's going to be an immediate protected species. So as you say, logging industries are done. But it's not just logging industries. Then you've got people who are using land for food. So all of a sudden, for transport, roads going through places, all of a sudden, it kind of grinds America to a halt. And that sounds silly, but it could, if so, because you've got one or two ways of dealing with it, haven't you? We do what we've just said, and it's protected, and we learn what we can about them, or they just go and hunt them down. And so, either way, it does present a problem. And so, we're all here talking about fantastic theories, but it could be something as mundane as it decimate the logging industry. And so, I think that's something that not a lot of people actually think about, but I think that's very valid, very credible reasoning, to be honest.
Well, and you probably know this too. Here in the United States, the state of Oregon has already made killing a Bigfoot illegal. People laugh at it, but that's a real law. You can't kill a Bigfoot in the state of Oregon. You can't do it. So,
and that's the thing, though, isn't it, with the authorities? The fact that I don't know the states, but in other states in America, they've got official Bigfoot trails beyond mere tourism.
Yeah.
Like literally warning people that you might encounter this here. Please be alert. So again, that does suggest that, whether officially or not, authorities are taking this quite seriously, and the presence of these creatures, whatever they are, is very real.
You were talking about the trickster element of all this, and I'm sure you're aware of this too, about the fact that here in the U.S. at the Pentagon, there's supposedly, this has been rumored for many years, but so rumored and also makes so much sense, I assume it's true, about the fact there's two different factions in the Pentagon regarding, and they're struggling about whether they should make the alien abduction or the alien phenomena public. But one of the factions says they don't want to do it because they literally think this is demonic. In other words, they think this is primarily a religious thing or a religious concept, and not necessarily a flesh and blood or space traveling thing. They think it's literally the devil coming down to earth and screwing and basically fucking with us. You know, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I mean, firstly, I think it's interesting that I think it might have been Tucker Carlson. I can't remember, but it was certainly in the mainstream news, and they were speaking about this. Now that kind of talk is most often reserved for UFO circles, alien abduction circles only. Serious UFO people don't talk about alien abduction, even never mind the demonic side of
Right,
it.
right,
I think the demonic thing, I think it again goes back to perception. Now, are we really dealing with demons and the devil? Well, probably not, in my opinion, but we probably are dealing with something that we would recognize as demonic and the devil. And so, yeah, that kind of does go back to that overall riding intelligence, that energy. But I mean, again, it depends where you want to nail your flag to the post, really, because if you look back at ancient writings and things like, and we're not wanting to get into the ancient alien theory and things like that, but they do say the gods came from the skies, blah blah blah, and then at some point they retreated, but only for humanity, the puppet kings, essentially, to rule on their behalf. I mean, I've even read theories that really get into this about humans' desire for gold, which people would get gold and they would leave tributes to the king, who in turn, some people say, give to the gods. So we need to ask, well, who are the gods? If there's any validity in the fact that there was real extraterrestrial gods or non-human intelligent gods in antiquity, no matter how far back that was, then okay, so where are they today? There does appear to be many secret societies, for example, that are very, very ultra protective and coincidentally are not now in positions of power. So are they guarding this kind of knowledge? Are they, rituals and stuff are very important to these people. I think it was Diana Pasolka was speaking about, the space race and how the East and West were performing essentially ritualistic practice to get ahead in the space race, and they were very serious about it. So, yeah, I think there is a demonic side to this, but my own personal view is it's something we would recognize as demonic, as opposed to literally demons. But who knows though? Because demons and the devil, they come from somewhere. They're not just imagined.
right.
So, yeah.
And just as an aside, my personal experience through life now is basically showing me that what most people consider evil is basically intense human stupidity, but true evil does exist. That's the conclusion I've come to. It's rare, but you do find it. You find it. And so now, okay, you said something that actually triggered something in my head, and I gotta think of what it was. So we're gonna take a little break. No, we're not. Oh, about the people at the Pentagon. So, but the thing is, so all right, is this stuff evil just because it's on people are afraid of stuff they don't know. So, I mean, is this just a natural human fear of the unknown instead of demonic? Is that what you know?
Yeah, I mean, it could be. I think things like evil, good, light, dark. I think they're just energies, aren't they? I mean, how I see this, So okay, so people can commit evil acts, for sure. It happens every day, and it's horrendous, and we all know that happens. But I suppose you think, well, where does that come from? Is that we were talking about consciousness and whether it comes from outside or within. Now, I'm not for 1 minute wanting to exonerate somebody who has committed atrocious crimes, whatever that may be. But a lot of people who are accused and convicted of this, and there's pretty much 100% done it as well, they will say things like, well, I heard voices, I was just told to do it, I just had a feeling I had to do this, I was an urge I couldn't fight. So yeah, is that purely medical, mental issues in that situation, or are we talking about something that is influencing? Because there's plenty of cases of this, and I know people, it's the easiest defense in the world, isn't it? I heard voices, it wasn't me. But I don't know. I find it interesting, but yeah, I think these are energies, and it's almost like it probably is within humanity, within man, how they use these energies. For example, nuclear energy is a good. I know that we're going from one thing to another, but nuclear energy, it's not a bad thing. It's a bad thing if it's in the wrong hands. So yeah, I think I kind of feel a little bit like that about that kind of thing.
So I was reading one of this piece you wrote on reincarnation today, and you touched on the people who said they've been reincarnated as another alien being, And so there's one story about this woman who was talking about her race of aliens, and she said she was basically a gray, and that's come to mean a lot of things. But she said that that they had stopped individual thinking because it led to greed, and that it destroyed their civilization. And the constant theme of people who say they've been abducted is that the aliens tell them, well, humanity's on the track to destroy themselves. And
Yeah.
I don't know. The thing is, I don't know if greed automatically destroys a society. I mean, it's definitely over. Too much greed is definitely a bad thing. But I don't know in and of itself. I don't know. Tell me, Marcus. That's why you're the guest.
Well, I mean, I remember the case that you're referring to. I think what's also interesting there is when people who think they have been or claim they've been abducted by aliens, particularly grey aliens, is they'll talk about how they appear almost robotic and how they have a hive mentality, and that's essentially what this woman was describing there. So, I'm not sure on the account. I mean, I'm not that I doubt the account. I take it on face value, like you do all of them. You treat me with a pinch of salt. With regards to hive mentality and stopping individual thinking, from my understanding and from the research of people such as David Jacobs and John Mack, Bud Hopkins as well, they were speaking about how these grey aliens might not actually, there's two trains of thoughts: either they can't reproduce themselves or they're not actually biologically real in terms that they're more robotic and they're actually serving a higher power. Another theory is that the reason behind alien abductions is because they want what makes us human, which is, like you say, our decision making, our emotions, our ability to think for ourselves, things that, for all their advanced technology that they may have, if indeed they are extraterrestrial, they seemingly can't do. But in terms of like whether that would be better for humanity, to stop individual thought, no, God, no. I think if anything, that's a trickster element right there, because I couldn't think of a worse situation for humanity to find itself in.
That's the fair reason I asked you, is because I was thinking the same thing. It's a trickster element. I think the same thing too.
Yeah, I think for humanity to stop thinking for each person to stop thinking for themselves would just be a real quick slippery slope, and I don't think that would be a good thing at all.
But on the other hand, this woman said she was a gray alien, and as a general rule, I'm talking generalities here. The gray aliens are supposedly come from Zeta Reticuli, 37 light years away, and supposedly they're like 2 million years ahead of us. And I think about this: we haven't had electronic technology on this planet for less than 100 years. I mean, your iPhone isn't even 20 years old, And so if you extrapolate that out 2 million years, if that's possible, well, first of all, I could see you might, as a society, you might become really kind of fucked up. I mean, what do you literally, at that point, you have all your material needs taken care of, I mean, and so what do you end up doing? You probably end up running around the galaxy just exploring shit because you literally have nothing else to do. One of the things I found, I had John Adams on. He runs a website on remote viewing, and he said he sent 6 of his remote viewers out to the 3-eye Atlas thing, and they all said it was an artificial construct. But what a couple of them said, which I found really fascinating, he said Adams asked them during the viewing session, like, who are these people that built this? And 2 of them said they're very bored. Which I found kind of, yeah, of course they're bored. They got nothing else to do. Are you still there? Hello? Did I lose you? Oh my God. I might have lost you. Marcus? Hello? Yeah, this is the reason we don't do this live. Yep, we lost him. We're going to give it just a second here to see he'll come back up. But yeah, I'm going to continue what I was talking about there. So the remote viewer said, well, they're very bored. Of course they're bored. They've had technology for 2 million years. Just like, you'd be bored out of your mind. What do you got? There's nothing left to do, So anyway, we're just like, it's the same thing. We literally don't know anything. We're just getting started here, I don't know if Marcus is going to come back, and we were going to. Oh, he did. Oh, you're back.
I'm here. Yes, what happened there? I got last thing I heard was you say it was an artificial construct, the remote viewers.
Yeah. So, okay. So what I was saying is that, 2 of the remote viewers said Adams asked them, "Who are these people?" And two of them said they're very bored. that's what
Right.
that's what they said. And of course, you're bored. As you've been, you had technology for 2 million years. There's nothing left to do. I mean, can you?
Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting one, this, isn't it? Because it's been brewing for months. I know somebody who they claim they're in touch with a spirit guide, and I'm not mentioning the name, but I say they're quite credible. They say the opposite. They say that it's completely natural object. There's nothing artificial about it at all. Um,
Interesting.
Now, whether it is or not, I mean, mentioning about if you're 2 million years advanced ahead in the future, I'll just say, I mean, you either do go out into the stars and see what you can find and blah blah blah, but you would expect also that if you're that far advanced, and as you said, think how far advanced we've come in the last 100 years. So if you've had 2 million, then you've almost would suspect these guys would have completely commanded space travel, however that is, whether it's through the use of wormholes and gateways or whatever. The other thing to consider is, perhaps you have society have become so advanced, similar to the legends of Atlantis, perhaps, that they just destroy their own planet. And I believe that is, and again, you treat these claims with caution, but people who claim to have been interacted with these creatures have said that that is the reason why they've come to Earth in the first place, and why they've left their own planet is it's just decimated through their own actions and through their own technological runaway, really. So it's an interesting thing, though, because as you say, a lot of alien abduction cases do revolve around the humanity's got to save itself. There's a lot of environmental messages are passed along, so that kind of brings something else into the picture. Is this some kind of subconscious thing? Are we almost giving messages to ourselves?
Yeah.
Or at an extreme level, perhaps somebody has hijacked this scenario and are trying to shape humanity. But yeah, it is interesting that, why would visitors be so concerned about our planet, unless of course they wanted it for themselves at some point down the line. But again, like everything we spoke about, there's so much to think about and so much to pull in
Well,
from different.
Marcus, what's your opinion? Do you think it's inevitable that humanity is going to end up doing ourselves in? Is it inevitable?
No, I wouldn't say it's inevitable. I mean, you look at the state of the world right now and you think, Jesus, you wouldn't have thought we'd have got to this point where there's, fighting going on left, right, and centre, serious fighting, I think maybe I've got too much faith in humanity, but I think outside of natural cataclysms or a meteor or something like that, no, I think
Right.
I would like to think that we would be able to pull ourselves through it. But I mean, 20 years ago, nobody would have said that we're basically at the start of another Cold War and we're getting East versus West things set up again. And we're not in a great place right now, put it that way.
That's true.
I'd argue with that.
That's true. Although I do share your opinion. I think that we're probably more likely to get hit by an asteroid than blow ourselves up. I think, and I wasn't talking about that. That might happen. Who knows?
Who knows exactly? But no, I'd like to think that there's enough good people out there, and hopefully we'll both be proven right. So we'll see what we end up.
The thing is about being 2 million years ahead. I mean, and there's been abductees have talked about this too, about the fact that the natural evolution of souls might not even to have a body. At some point, your technology, you literally could float around space without having a body. You probably could do that. So.
Yeah, I mean, and it's isn't it? I mean, if you believe in a soul, now whatever that is, you don't need to be religious to believe in the soul either. I don't think.
That's right. I agree. Right.
It's just an energy. So, we talk about you go to heaven. Well, you could go to the heavens, which is how people in antiquity would have viewed space. So perhaps it does do that. I mean, there's been cases of, I think it was a Salyut 7, the Russian space station back in 84, I think, and several cosmonauts, seriously reported seeing what they said were like angel-like figures, essentially like beings outside the space station. So what were they seeing? Were they seeing essentially souls? Or because all a soul really would be is a manifestation of energy.
Right.
And science tells us that energy never dies. It has to go somewhere. So perhaps it does go into these other realms, these other existences, what people back in antiquity would have called the heavens. And maybe that's where we get those things from.
Hey, Marcus, thanks for joining us. I appreciate you coming back there too after our little technical snafu. I really appreciate that. Here's your podcast website. What is it? The Anomaly podcast.com.
Yeah, the Anomaly Project podcast.com.
Right.
And, yeah, every week when we speak to different researchers, it's good stuff.
You and Steve are both really good talkers. I haven't heard this. I'm going to have to listen to this. I bet you. And then here's your book from UFO Insight. And you're the editor of UFOinsight.com. And you're at mysteriousuniverse.com. Where else?
Yeah, Mysterious Universe. I write for those guys usually once a week. You can find some of the stuff on Listverse. I don't write for them so much now, but there's a lot of stuff on there. Coincidences, things like conspiracies. Me Time for the Mind. You find me on there too. I usually pump out a few things there. But yeah, I like to stay busy because, and like we've proven on this chat, there's just so much to get into. I don't ever envision a time when I won't want to do this anymore and I'll be bored. I just think there's always something to speak about.
I have an hour's worth of questions, but I just don't like to do these interviews past like 45, 50 minutes. I think the audience just burns out, which is not, I don't have to tell you this. I mean, the 3-hour interview is kind of the fad right now, but if you have a real life, I don't think anyone's really interested in doing that. So I don't know.
No, I agree. I think we said when we started the Anomaly Project, between 45 minutes to 90 minutes max is where you want to
Right. Anyway, you take care. I'm looking forward to having you on again. Like I said, I still have more questions, but yeah, we'll get into it another time. All right. And tell Steve I said hello, would you?
Oh, for sure. I'll let him know. I've spoken to you, and you know where I am if you need me. And send me a link when this is live and later on today, and I'll share it with our audience too.
I'll do that. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
We'll see you. Bye. Our thanks to Marcus Lough there for a fascinating discussion. I love that crap, and I hope you do too. And that's the problem. We're babies. My late brother-in-law always said this. He was a very brilliant man. He said, we're 2 weeks out of the trees. He's absolutely right. We are. We don't know crap. We don't know anything. And so now I'm going to try to educate you on stuff that I think that matters, and most people don't, but that's the reason I do it. This is the Jimcast, part 2 of our show for Wednesday, November 19th. This is a part where I tell you all the stuff you don't hear in the regular media. I'm getting more and more away from politics. I got to admit, after doing this for years, I'm tired of politics. I really don't give a crap. And the other thing is, too, I'm just going to, a recent poll came out today from Fox News, and it basically said nobody knows anything. The two sides are basically equally divided. No one seems to be able to make a good distinction on what's real news and what isn't. And on top of that, it appears that the Democrats' plan of flooding the media cycle with basically low-grade information is working. So God bless you. You go ahead. You vote for it. You get the government you deserve. That's what I say. So, all right. So where are we on this? Let me pull up my notes, because I keep notes, because I do that. And yes, I do this whole show off the top of my head. I got a little outline here. First thing, scientists at the Carnegie Institution for Science, researchers, have come to the conclusion that life on Earth is probably 1 billion years older than we thought previously. Now, I'm going to explain to you how they figured this out. They figured this out because of the molecular degradation of or the atomic degradation of molecules that are involved in biological processes. In other words, the biological processes are long gone. They've been gone for 1 billion years, but they can carbon date the stuff that's left behind from those processes. Confusing as hell. I barely understand it too. But anyway, they've come to the conclusion that life on Earth, and when they're talking about life, they're talking about molecular life. They're not talking about your Uncle Charlie the Neanderthal. I'm not talking about him. They're talking. They're talking. I just amused myself there for a second. They're talking about molecular life is 1 billion years older than we thought. So, and speaking of that, meanwhile, a guy named Dylan Borland comes on Whitley Strieber's podcast, Whitley Strieber of Communion fame, and he says that at least one extraterrestrial spacecraft that the United States military has recovered was found in an archaeological dig, and that spacecraft is at least or has been on Earth for at least 8,000 years. So, in other words, he says the government has proof that these craft have been flying around the Earth for at least 8,000 years. Now, meanwhile, I like to segue all this stuff together because this is where you start to get to, I don't know if it's proof, but kind of substantial evidence. The people who have examined the Booga sphere, that basketball size aluminum sphere that apparently crash landed in Booga, Colombia last year, they say they have found organic material inside that sphere that they've carbon dated to precisely 12,560 years ago. So, which means that sphere has been flying around Colombia or somewhere for at least 12,000 years. So, you make of that what you will. This was, I think, at the end of the day, as much as we make fun of it, of ancient aliens and chariots of the gods and all that crap, I think at least some of that stuff will end up being true. Maybe not all of it, but some of it. The thing about Ezekiel and the wheel from the Bible is it really, really sounds like he saw an extraterrestrial spacecraft. It really sounds like a flying saucer. It's hard to read that and not conclude anything otherwise. So, and I don't know if you know this, some guy who was set out to disprove the whole story he said he ended up proving it. He has built a model based on the specifications that were listed in that biblical chapter of what that thing looked like. And he said, it's not just that the model is functionally would work. It's that it fits perfectly in a bay that supposedly is Ezekiel constructed to houses to let this thing land. Apparently, I got to be honest, I've never read that all the way through. I've never read it. So, but seriously, at some point we're going to come to the conclusion that these things have been here for a long time. You heard Marcus and I talking about that earlier, about the fact that there's the people who say they've talked to the gray aliens have said the gray aliens have been flying around the galaxy for 2 million years. Oh my God, I can't even fathom it. And once again, I need to remind you of this. You haven't had an iPhone for 20 years. You haven't had one for 20 years. We've only had functioning electricity on this planet for 150 years, and basically no electronic technology for not even 100. Not even that, not even close. 60, 80 maybe years. Yeah, try 2 million. My God, unbelievable. So Borland said that we have recovered something in an archaeological dig. Now, if I'm right from that story, in Turkey they also found apparently an ET spacecraft in an archaeological dig from about the same time period. That wasn't the Americans. That's somebody else apparently. It's you can't keep this stuff secret forever. People say all the Jim, you can't keep it secret. It's not secret. We're talking about it. I'm talking about it. It's not secret. It's up to you don't believe it. Now I understand that, and I don't know if I believe it either. Like I said, some of this stuff I'm sure is true. It's like the old thing about advertising. Half of my advertising works. I don't know which half does. I can't tell you what's true and what isn't, but there's such a preponderance of information here. The fact that every single piece of it would be false, right now just defies the odds. Some of this stuff is true, and so I'm basically letting you decide what's true and what isn't. It's the same thing about the Bigfoot thing that Marcus and I were talking about. I mean, there are two distinct camps here. My friend Larry Newman Bigfoot is a undiscovered primate that's walking around the forest in the United States, and we haven't caught yet. Some people, Stan Gordon says, no, there's a paranormal aspect to this animal. That because too many people have reported seeing it disappear right before their eyes. So it's I don't know. I don't know what to tell you, but something's going on, and that's what I want to make certain you understand. Something's going on. So meanwhile, today, Elon Musk appears at a Saudi Arabian tech summit in Washington, D.C., because the Saudi Arabians are visiting Trump. And he says something I've been saying for quite a while, and that is at some point, AI will make money irrelevant, and it will. And he has not put a date on it. I've said 1 to 300 years, so I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. But yeah, it's going to happen. It will. We will end up eventually. I mean, and all the you good Republicans out there and capitalists, and I'm one of you. So just hold on to your seats. I'm not trying to dissuade anybody here. At some point, I think we will drift into socialism because money. Well, capitalism is based on scarcity. So if you eliminate scarcity, you basically eliminate the need for capitalism. But that's like I said, that we're at least 100 years away from this. For now, balls to the walls, man. Right now it's the only thing that works, and everyone says, "Well, it's so flawed." Capitalism has so many flaws, and it does. It does. It's still the least flawed system. That's the only thing. Yeah, all of these systems have incredible flaws. Capitalism is the least flawed one, and also it's the only one that mathematically creates money. So there's that too. So you want to get rich, you want a prosperous society, you have no choice. Will Zoran Mamdani in New York City figure that out? Probably not within his lifetime because he's committed now. So, and I need to address this. I've talked about this before, and I'm talking about these goddamn kids. I'm right now. I want them to get off my lawn because they go to college and they come out and all they do is parrot what their leftist professors tell them. Like there's no critical thinking at all. And what the hell happened here? I don't quite understand this. Now I know what's going to happen in the future. Half of them will end up realizing, oh my God, well, all this stuff we were taught was crap, and the other half won't, which is pretty much what's happened to. I mean, that was what was the name of the hippie Abby Hoffman, and I can't remember the name of his friend who became a very famous and wealthy stockbroker. They traveled around the country, Hoffman and this guy, and they did a series of debates. They did this for years. They were best of friends, even though they completely disagreed on this. And Hoffman couldn't give it up. His friend, former Weather Underground guy, he said, "Yeah, no, I was wrong." Hoffman refused to give up the ghost, and that's pretty much what's going to happen. You'll end up with a generation split half and half. So I don't know where that leads us. Like I said, just saying a few minutes ago, I think you will get the government you deserve. That's what I think. But anyway, so yeah, Musk says that he's saying that AI, and he's talking specifically about AI humanoid robots, will pretty much make work irrelevant. That's what he says. Work will become optional. Now, somebody's got to figure this out because I've said this before. If you have a replicator that can endlessly churn out exact copies of like a Monet painting, the original is still going to be worth a lot of money because there's only one of those. So I don't know. I don't know how you're going to handle this. I don't. In Star Trek, in the Star Trek universe, they very obliquely addressed this all by what they called credits, but they never really talked about it. I mean, they would mention occasionally there was no money in their society, but I suppose maybe our credits money. I have no idea. I don't know. It's all made up anyway, and I'm not talking about making stuff up here, But Musk refused to put a date on this. He did. He wouldn't say when this is going to happen. But I think he's more or less right. It's like we will have at some point we'll have an army of AI robots that will do anything that anybody thinks is the least bit distasteful or boring or menial or whatever. You'll get your robot to do it. Now, I was just talking about this a few days ago about the fact that the government is restarting a loan program now for uh, nuclear power plants. If you want to build a nuclear power plant, the government will lend you money to do it. So the first loan actually went out yesterday to Microsoft to restart 3 Mile Island. The government loaned Microsoft $1 billion. Now, the thing about that is, okay, this story was in Fox News or Fox Business, excuse me. And the sub headline was restarting the 3 Mile Island reactor would power the equivalent 800,000 homes by 2027. But that's not what it's going to do. Why is Microsoft starting up this reactor? Because they need power to run Copilot. That's why they need to run their AI. Now, the estimates, and I think this is true, the estimates are that by 2030, only 5 years from now, 1/8 of all the electricity generated in the United States is going to go to power AI, 12% of it. And that's, I have no, apparently some of this electricity, the excess from 3 Mile Island will go to power homes, but who knows how much that'll be. And that depends on how many stupid questions you ask Copilot. That's what it depends on. So I actually asked Copilot because I use Copilot all the time because it's free. I got it with my operating system here. Here you go. I like free crap. So it's free right now. It's probably going to be free almost forever. Uh, there's all sorts of ways they can monetize that. So I don't think we'll ever end up paying for it. And the reason I'm going to skip forward here, the reason I actually uh, asked Copilot today is because, one moment here. Oh, yeah, because Judge Boasberg, this judge who's had just really, really weird uh, judgments from, he sits on the Ninth Circuit, I think, or something like that in California. So he ruled today, and I agree with this. He ruled that Meta, that does not have a monopoly in social media. That would be Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, and and Facebook Messenger, the Facebook company Meta. Now that's the name of the company. They do not have a monopoly, and they don't. That's exactly correct. They do not have a monopoly. They don't. There's too many competing services. But what I wanted to look up, and when I asked Copilot, I knew that when Facebook bought Instagram, which of course is part of their family, and turns out is makes almost as much money as Facebook itself, that when they bought Instagram, they very famously paid $1 billion for it, but I couldn't remember the date. Turns out it was April 2012. So, and people thought Zuckerberg was nuts to pay $1 billion for this startup company. Now they had a good number. I think they have 5 or 10 million users at that point. They had a fairly good user base, but people thought he was absurd. So what I asked Copilot today is, what's the current valuation? Well, it depends on how you evaluate it, but it's at least $70 billion, at least right now. So he definitely got his money's worth. I mean, you got to give him props for that. He saw into the future there. You know, he paid $1 billion so that's worth at least 70 times now. And a lot of people think it's worth a lot more, but that's the minimum. That's a conservative estimate. That's worth, and it's not a monopoly. Yeah, you go to TikTok. Matter of fact, I just hate to actually talk the virtues of TikTok here. I really do, because I gotta admit, I think the vast majority of stuff on TikTok is complete utter crap. But TikTok is successful because they completely changed the game regarding the algorithm of discovery. That's the reason. They're completely different than any other current social media platform from that point of view. It's the only platform where things can truly, honestly go viral. All the rest of the viral stuff you've ever heard has been fake crap, or the vast majority of it anyway, 95% of it. Music stars, influencers, all of it is somebody is behind, either paying it, pushing it, publicizing it somehow. But on TikTok, things actually do go viral on their own without any help. And that's the difference. And people notice it. They do. And that's the reason it's been so popular. We post stuff on TikTok. I'm astonished at how popular some of it becomes. We don't do anything. We literally just put it up. That's it. And it just goes. That's not true on any other social media platform. And actually, the problem for us is the opposite. We've been banned from Facebook. I got let back on, and it was such a pain in the ass. I didn't do it. I think YouTube shadow banned us for a year. Got virtually no traction there at all. But TikTok, oh man, the problem is we can't do the live show on TikTok because you can only do a show both live and post a video that's they're not over an hour. Although I think at some point, I think right now we're posting shorts. We post about 4 a day. I think we will start posting interviews because most of our interviews are under an hour long. Just the interviews themselves. We'll see. But at any rate, yeah, they don't have they do not have a monopoly, and the government is so freaking behind on this. This is the Federal Trade Commission. You know, they're the people in the 1990s that sued Microsoft over the supposed monopoly of Internet Explorer, and then along comes Chrome and kicks their ass. And you had to download Chrome, whereas Internet Explorer came with your Windows operating system, and people did it anyway, and it just completely left Internet Explorer in the dust. And actually, Microsoft, in terms of web browsers, has never recovered from that. I mean, Edge is a good product. And right now, I mean, there's 4 or 5 different web browsers you can use. They're highly competitive, but still, people download. Chrome is a big 800-pound gorilla in that space, no doubt about it. Now, this is really something that you didn't hear about in the news. It's really interesting. That's been floating around, and apparently there was finally the reason I'm bringing this up today is there was a definitive judgment. And I got to get this. First of all, I have to explain we're talking about a married couple here, but they're both women. So it's a lesbian couple. So don't get that. It got confusing when I was reading the news reports. I had to constantly keep that in mind, is that there's 2 wives here, basically. So Summer Warden was married to Anne McClain. Anne McClain is a U.S. astronaut. Actually, she's a U.S. Intelligence operative for the Air Force that became an astronaut. Okay. All right. She went up to the International Space Station. This is Anne McClain. Her wife, Summer Warden, and they're divorced now, but they were married at the time, accused her of accessing her bank accounts from space. So you have there, or illicitly accessing her bank accounts. Was apparently the first crime ever committed in space. Now, who the hell adjudicates that? And the thing is, this has never really been answered about who's actually in charge of crimes in space. It's the first time it's ever been alleged. Now, what actually happened is that Summer Warden, the woman who alleged this, she lied, basically, that the astronaut, Anne McClain, actually did have legal access to those bank accounts, and she filed a false claim, and now she's going to go to trial for filing a false crime report, basically. So the whole thing, the thing about the crime in space is now moot. But you do wonder, I mean, we don't have any, there's no infrastructure or protocol set up to deal with this. I don't know if you remember, there was this is, I think, 2014, about 10 years ago, there was a mini-series on the Sci-Fi Channel called Ascension. And it's funny that Conaway and I were just talking about this a few days ago, because he thought it was just kind of a bullshit sci-fi show, and I did too, but the thing is, I'm a nerd, so I'm kind of I was fascinated by the premise. Here's the premise. First of all, the outgoing premise, the outline premise is actually real. And that is in around 1962, John F. Kennedy, the current president at that time, about a year before he got killed, contemplated building a giant rocket and sending a bunch of people into space in case the world blew itself up, as in the Cuban Missile Crisis. Okay, that happened October 62. And they thought, well, maybe we should do something here in case humanity actually completely wipes itself off the map. So they contemplated building this. It was called Project Orion. This is public. This is real. This is the real part of this, about building a giant rocket that's literally in like a Noah's Ark and sending a bunch of people and a bunch of animals into space. And so the nearest habitable star, not habitable, they didn't even know at that time, but the nearest star was Alpha Centauri, 4.5 light years away, and they figured it would take, under the current rocket power, 80 years to get there. So you're talking about a multiple generational ship. So they didn't do that. In the show Ascension, the premise is that they publicly killed the project, but privately they still did it. That they actually launched this giant rocket into space. Okay, it held 600 people. Most of them were highly scientists and their families, a bunch of animals. This thing was supposedly bigger than the Empire State Building, significantly so, and they launched it toward Alpha Centauri, and it was going to take 100 years to get there. And in 2014, it was 51 years. They were at the point of no return. In other words, at that point, they could turn around and come back, and they had to decide whether they were going to do that or not. And this whole rocket was also in the show. I don't think this was true in real life. It was powered by nuclear fission bombs. So this is a legitimate, supposedly a legitimate way of propulsion, and that is you're literally exploding a bunch of nuclear bombs at regular intervals behind your spacecraft, and there's a giant, basically an absorbing shock absorber plate that pushes your spacecraft forward. And you do this, if you do this long enough and hard enough, you're probably about 70% of the speed of light, so then you're pretty much cruising. So excuse me. So this is in the show. The reason the show is a mini series, I didn't think there were 8 episodes. What happened was they already figured there's going to be 3 generations of families on the ship. And so they're in the 2nd generation now. They're in the middle of it. For the first time ever, they have a murder on board. And that's the thing. They don't know how to deal with it. They've never had a crime of any major portion, capital crime on the spacecraft. And they don't know how to deal with it. And part of the show is about that. The other part of the show is about, it's actually kind of a trick plot. And I'm going to spoiler alert here, but you're probably not going to watch this anyway. Although I think you can still see it on Netflix or something like that. I think spoiler alert. But here goes. What really happened is that they did not launch this thing into space. That they kept these people captive on a giant spacecraft that was on the ground, and believe it or not, ostensibly in Minneapolis. They never actually named the city, but all the screenshots they used were of Minneapolis. They had a giant hangar in Minneapolis where this spacecraft had never left the ground, and the people on board don't know that. And then the real reason they did this is that some scientists predicted that if you lock these people up for long enough and think they're in space, that at some point someone's going to develop psychic abilities, and that actually happens during the show. So so the whole thing's kind of that was Conway's thing about the fact it's all a convoluted mess. And so it's starting to get out in the show that this thing exists because, like I said, then in the real world, they canned this project. But a reporter is trying to figure out that no, they didn't can it. This thing's real. It's in that hangar over there. Anyway, so the thing is, I'm bringing that up because, they had a murder on board the ship and they didn't know what to do. They did not know how to handle it. They had no police force. There were 600 people. It was basically like a small town. There were 600 people living on board the spacecraft, and they didn't know what to do. And so they got the same thing here. There's supposedly a crime committed at the International Space Station. Well, who handles that? And not only that, it's the International Space Station. It's not the American Space Station. Like, whose laws apply? Well, they got to figure this crap out. They do. Anyways, like I said, it turns out there was no actual crime. So now that's all kind of moot. Oh, man. Problems, man. Oh, geez. And I'm going to leave you with this. And I promote this in the show description. Today, the UN declared today World Toilet Day. So and they say I'm not kidding about this. This is the funny part. The UN says if you don't have a toilet, the reason is climate change. Of course it is. Of course it is. It was the same. We had Patrick Moore on the show. It's still that is still, and that was only we were only 6 months in. By the way, like I said in the intro, we're gonna have our 300th show 2 weeks from today. And this is, I think we were only like 50 shows in, and we had Patrick Moore on, the climatologist, and his big thing is that, and he's totally convinced me based on the science, and you should buy his book, which is called something about catastrophic events in terms of gloom or something. It's like he shouldn't have titled that. It's a small book. It's only 120 pages, but he explains in that book why climate change is complete, why human caused climate change is complete bullshit. He explains it. And the book is relatively dense. There's no mathematical formulas, but there's a lot of charts and graphs. And his thing, and the thing is, this is very important to point out, global warming is real. The world is warming up, but humans aren't causing it. So anyway, but the thing is, like 2 weeks after that show, the UN put a page up on their website saying that, we can solve the climate problem if you give us $75 trillion. Now, they took that page down. The page is no longer there. They took it down after about a week. But I saved a copy of it. I still have it. We can solve the climate problem for $75 trillion. Yeah, sure. You do that. I'm sure you can. I bet there's going to be a lot of people driving around a lot of limousines. That's what I think. Oh my God, what are they thinking? So today's World Toilet Day. Oh God Almighty! It's like, yeah, and you don't have a toilet because of climate change. That's the reason. That's the reason you don't have one. God bless Al Gore. All right, folks. Tomorrow night. Well, Jared and a lot. Okay, so we didn't do a show last night because both our guests had to crap out. Well, actually, Michael Harrison got sick. Sorry, I hope he's feeling better. And Jarrett Knott did do his interview. I explained this at the top. He did do his interview, but the thing is, we had such severe technical problems during the interview. We had to edit it, it's the first time we've ever actually had to edit an interview. People say, well, the great thing about pre-recording these interviews, you get that we don't edit anything, and we're lazy. We're lazy and tired. No, we record the interviews and we plop them up. There's no editing at all. But this one we had to edit because there were too many breaks in it. So because of that, we're playing that tomorrow night, and Tim Conaway's coming on. It's scheduled. So we got 2 guests tomorrow, which means, unfortunately, normally on Thursdays I'm trying to do open phones, but because we have 2 guests tomorrow night, we're not gonna do that. So on this coming Monday, the 24th, Dr. Gilda Carl is going to be joining us again. Her second appearance on the show. She wrote the book "Real Men Don't Go Woke," and she's just a charming woman, and we love talking to her. So then we're taking the rest of the week off for Thanksgiving. Like I said, our 300th show is going to be 2 weeks from tonight on Wednesday, December 3rd. Now, unfortunately, that I have to take the night after that off. So we're only have. Matter of fact, the week after that, we're only doing 3 shows too. I have to do this. I have to do what I got to do. So that's my life. My life is talking to you and talking to people, and I got to be honest. I love it. I'm 70 years old, and I love doing this. I really do. And I want to thank you for watching and listening. Especially now we got the audio only backup on Spreaker. So if you say to your Echo Box, if you say play me the latest episode of Jim Peters at Night, it will do that. And it's not necessarily the one from the night before, but they do change every day. I think we're about 2 weeks. We're 2 weeks behind, I think, but we're posting them daily. So you will get a new show every day. So yeah, but if you're listening, that's great. If you're watching, yeah, it's a TV show on the intertube. That's what it is. So thanks for watching and thanks for listening. Good night, Uncle Donnie, wherever you are. And good night to you, wherever you may be. We'll be back tomorrow night, folks, with Tim Conaway and Jarrett Knott. Looking forward to it. Have a nice evening.